transform you. Now we are going to the second sessions and move to the second keynote speaker, Mr. Riswanda, PhD. Mr. Riswanda is Associate Professor in Faculties of Politics and Social Science at Universitas Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa, and while serving as a research fellow and university teaching in Parahyangan Catholic University and University of Pajajaran. He is also a reviewer in some rank A international journals and editorial members board in many accredited national journals. He completed Master of Public Administrations and the Flinders Institute of Public Policy and Management, and achieved his PhD from the School of Social and Public Policy, Flinders University of South Australia. His research and teaching interests lie in the area of public policy, ranging from policymaking design to implementations with a focus on critical policy analysis. And some of his recent research are critical analysis on entrepreneurial strategies on drug abuse in Indonesia, advances in social science, education and humanities research, rural-urban linkage and local government capacity in coping with water crisis, a brief note from Indonesia, advances in social science, education and humanities research, educating and encouraging creative industry, implications for marketing strategy, advances in social science, education and humanities research. And today, Mr. Riswanda will talk about presentations on the recent trends and developments in public administrations. Mr. Riswanda, the time is yours.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Good day. Can I please have a share screen? Okay, it works. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity counting me in. Dr. Asep Muhammad Iqbal and Professor Ali Nurdin for this brilliant conference of getting us together discussing of a lot of things about social science and the emerging trends. I think having seen a lot of keynotes, great keynotes, and delivering excellent thoughts about the thinking. I'm not lecturing today, but I think I would like to give a brief presentation about the emerging trends and issues in contemporary social and public policy. And I would like to highlight systemic thinking and practice as a method, as a emerging trends in methodological pluralism and how to do research in policy. And I think I would like to start with acknowledgement because some of my works mostly influenced by Professor Janet McIntyre Mills and Robert Flood and Yvonne, to whom I owe depths of gratitude. And to start with, I would like to say that the emerging trends now is to bridging the gap between policy thinking or between social thinking and policy practice or social practice. And I would like to underline, we might want to reflect our thinking in doing research by starting with what others can't see. What is the big picture of it? What is being asked? Why do I want the answer? Because a lot of I have slides showing some of my students' work in Pajajaran or in Untirta, and sometimes people forget, where do I stand to look at the questions? Presentation for Professor Said Alatas is interesting. Where do my standpoint of view, where do I start with, and what extent and whose opinions, which perspective that I'm about to answer is, and what conclusions am I drawing, and what are the implications of my questions, and more importantly, what am I taking for granted here in doing research? So this is just a simple idea of critical thinking, first of all. And systemic thinking and practice is about a breakthrough. It's about wanting to get out of post-structuralist and postmodernism. It's not really a neo-postmo, but it's about recognizing patterns and interrelationships. So weak issues in social sciences, especially in policy research, um, um, demanding for how we can sing holes, say COVID-19. It's not about public health per se. It's about how we can learning how to synthesize economic aspect, social aspect, and political aspect of how to regulate people and how to they behave in such a pandemic period, and how policymakers it's not only about coming up with a good regulation of how to compliant people obeying the rules, but it's about how to get out of the economic situations. And one of my work published in systemic practice and action research is pretty much adopting boundary critiques and how we span the boundary of thinking, and how we also reflects the boundary judgments. So Share would say, if you wish to influence or control behavior of a system, you must act on the system as a whole. Tweaking in one place is just some captures 2 decades ago when dramas about closing down the localizations in Indonesia, creating nuance, creating political and social nuance, and to put aside having to put aside religious tendencies, having to put aside a judgment about these situations. So the thing is, just an example, the thing is, I would like to say the conundrum of trends and issues in contemporary social and public policy is how we can come up with a systemic thinking, how we can start with this is an aspect that cannot go by itself, how we can get out from a silo thinking that, for instance, huge development gaps. People tend to see this likely in macroeconomic terms, and but then development gaps also demands for empowering people to engage in development process. Whose voices counting in your research? Whose views that you are taking into account? And say lowering living standards and massive urbanization. I think in most Asian countries today, massive urbanization, it happens. And high risk for women and children who are unable to express their strategic rights within households, communities, and local governments are just examples of existing issues and trends in contemporary social and public policy. So again, how we can stretching the boundary of views as wide as possible is what I'm making the case today. And human mind is unable to know the whole, as taking into account varying lenses from various perspectives is vital. The thing with the research today is that, well, we do have conferences. Sometimes we fed up with conference with multidisciplinary issues and all that. But when we then coming down to the conclusions of facts and values and how we can come up with ability to predict, ability to explain, especially in terms of policy rationale, we sometimes miss out two important things. The facts. When we talk about facts in research and wanting to synthesize that with values, whose voice counts actually, and whose lenses that you want to go straight to. So, and this is just my work. And when I work with local stakeholders and how to facilitate narrative, how to facilitate stories, and even said power, emotions is also an aspect that we can actually count with weightings. and how their capacity to select use relevant methods, taking issues into power into account. This is an example of how we can see interrelationship and how we can synthesize those emerging ideas. For instance, government regulations in this political, social, and economic issues concerning the use of water, how to govern water, and how to engage community, and then how to draw the lines between what seems to be separated in one social and policy issues. And I would like to also say how we can also do methodological pluralism. And I think in most of my students' work, I can see that there's a tradition for empiricism, especially in Indonesia, and how a grounded theory is not really popular for a dissertation, for example. And but then we need to remind ourselves, including myself. I would like to reflect that what is the state of the art of your research. You see, when you use a mixed method or whatever, and how you can come up with the pattern, the flexible and the dynamic and locally decidable, as quoting or rephrasing Professor Said Al-Atas, for instance. And another thing is, this is just also another example, how to connecting the dots, how to put the connecting dots or connected ideas on your research, and how to mitigate the causes and adapting to the actual facts. Because I think I would like to remind myself as well that social science is pretty much dynamic, and how we can adapt to the actual facts is vital, and consequences of policy choices for those affected, not only for those involved in deciding, for instance. And the Internet of Things, for instance, in this topic, how traditional style of research can be shifted to, I don't like the phrase modern, but up-to-date methods of research. So in sum up, a join-up governance is about how to mix different paradigms, about to connecting ideas of different style of research, how to get out from an old school traditions, and how to we can come up with critical thinking per se. For instance, critical ethnographic participatory action research is just an example of that. And this is the main point: how to bridge the gap between researchers and policymakers. Sometimes in my some of my work, I can see that when we work with the ministries or departments, or this is the academic ideas here, very philosophical and abstract thinking, and how to bridge the gap between that abstract thinking with the policy practice in terms of reality. So one of the bridge could be in how academia can also talks in popular terms in media, for instance, can also how policy practitioners can also use their own capacity, influenced by or shaped by research done by academics, for instance. We've tried that in Pajajaran University by say by doing a little workshop on how to do critical systemic praxis and all that. And then we've tried to building a connections between research and policy practice in particular. Although the thing is, when you want to have a breakthrough and try to try to discourse for yourself, not by yourself, but for yourself. And I've done that, and I think I've that influenced some of my students' work in graduate school. So that's all. I think Dr. Asep Muhammad Iqbal would like to give more time for discussions here, since it's not a class, so it's supposed to be a conference. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Riswanda, for the very insightful presentations. Now we can move to the second session, which is the discussion. Again, I will open for 3 questions, and if you would like to ask the questions, you can use the raise hand feature, and I will choose the first 3 questions. Okay. Yeah. First, okay. First we have Professor Alatas, and while waiting for the other participants who would like to ask questions, I can allow Professor Alatas to start the questions.
Thank you very much. I was just interested in maybe you can say a little bit more about critical systemic praxis, because I'm interested in, of course, and many people are interested in critical thinking and critical theory, but we hear less about critical praxis. So maybe you could say a little bit more about what you mean by praxis and what is critical about it. I think that would be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Praxis could be defined as a mixed combination of theory and practice. It's the terms popularize how research can reach out the mixed methods, and how qualitative perspective, for example, is not standing by itself. And whilst it derives from term practice, of course, can be said. But the thing is, criticism is often misled by a neo postmodernism. I mean, it's it start with a circular of critical system thinker that want to engineer the pluralism of methods. That's all, Prof. I hope that could answer your questions.
Okay, thank you. And I will open the other questions for the participants. If anyone would like to ask questions. Okay. Oh, maybe one questions for me, Mr. Riswanda. You previously stated that there is the need to bridge the gap between researchers and policymakers. And this is also actually one of the things that often discussed when I was doing my master degree. And can you maybe elaborate the way or beside, completing a conference or using popular terms in media, is there any other ways that academia can use to introduce research to people, not only other researchers, but also like people in general?
Very well said, actually. Yes. Bridging the gap between policy researchers or social science researchers and policy practitioners pop in my head when I was doing some works for, say, the Nation Narcotics Boards or the Ministry of Women and Children and all that. But it's just that I was concerned by the fact that most research just stand in a book or international journal, read by professors and their students. But then when we remind ourselves, this is the policy fact here, and criticize our policymakers should learn more about this and blah blah and such. Farah, that's an excellent question. So to bridge the gap is about how researchers can also talks in mainstream networks. Say some of my students' projects making a poster looks like I put on my slides academic posters, and they put them in social medias, and how that can reach wider audience. People come with questions, and then the students answer that on YouTube and all that with simple ideas and how to simplify complicated and high intellectual rank research into more down to earth language. That's the gap actually. And when we talk about say for instance research that index of index of participations, index of happiness, like our governor here in West Java, and how that could go to people's mind. Oh, okay, this is index of happiness here, and how you can explain how to get the happiness index by simple language. So my experience that say some of my work being published, how people can realize the idea of governing water, and how people can realize the idea of getting narrative of people who have hey, this is an addicts here, and how the institution can come up with a good message of their narrations, their emotions, and that could go to a measures too, you see. Instead of saying, oh, okay, this is what UNODC is saying about drugs addicts, and might you're in a hole here, a dark hole. And I say to the hey, how we can do religious interventions by quoting socio-religious readers, by quoting that's called can be measured up too into academic research. So starting with a grounded idea, starting with theorizing the facts instead of simply adapting the facts and then relate that to a theory. Well, okay, that's a research, but grounding your ideas and from starting from the facts and values into a simple state of the art that is applicable. So Prof. Said Alatas is about practice, is about simplifies a complicated academic culture into more down to earth practice research. Farah, I think talk too much. Is that answering your questions or?